Hi, everybody. I'm Vivian White. I'm coming to you from the Astronomical Society of the Pacific in San Francisco, and we are helping to organize all of the volunteers for this incredible project. I want to do a couple of quick announcements before we really get started with the presentation, just so that you're all on board. Let's see. You should be seeing something like, I'll see if I can grab this. So these buttons up here are how you're going to interact with us, and they mean different things. The Q&A is for questions that you want to give to the panelists. And so if you come up with questions along the way, feel free to put them in there. That way we can keep track of them and make sure we get them all answered. The other one is the chat, which brings up a window just kind of like this. And make sure that you choose all panelists and attendees here. That's going to be important, unless you just want to write to us panelists, but you should have an option. When you click on this, it'll say all panelists or all panelists and attendees. And you're going to want to make sure to choose all attendees if you're going to talk to everybody. And yes, this presentation will be available for download after probably in the next day or so. So we'll put a note about that on the Google group. So do you guys want to give it a try and tell us who you are and where you're coming from? You can put it in the chat there. Just make sure to hit all panelists and attendees so that everybody else who's attending can also hear you. So hi, everybody. I'll start. Hey, it worked. Okay, great. So you're all on board. Check. From all over. So Spencer, if you were going to ask a question, make sure to put that in the Q&A and not in the chat. We'll just double check that because the chat goes by pretty quickly and the Q&A will be saved. We're going to have Q&A session at the end, so we'll make sure that we save all of those there. All right, I'm going to turn this little guy off. And I think we're going to be recording now, so let's get started. Welcome, everyone. We have people from all over the country here, and we're happy to have you for this second photo team training webinar. We have got a really great lineup tonight. A lot of great people are joining us from Google, from UC Berkeley, and here from the Astronomical Society of the Pacific. I'll introduce them kind of as they come along. I'm Vivian White, and I'm going to take you through the webinar training tonight. So we're going to be talking tonight about all of the techniques that you will need in order to take a photo of the total eclipse, and also getting you ready for the test run that we're going to have on this Saturday, July 1st. So a quick overview of what we'll talk about. Calvin Johnson from Google is going to tell us about the big idea of what we are actually trying to do, kind of get us all in the mood for doing this. And then we're going to talk about equipment needs and preparation needs, both in advance of the 21st of August and also day of, how to submit photos, some new things that we have that have just come out I'm pretty excited to share. And then last but not least, we'll talk about the testing run in July. So let me introduce Calvin Johnson. He is from the Google Making and Science team, and he's going to share with us the big idea of what we're doing here and why we're up to this.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So I'm Calvin Johnson on the Making and Science team. I coordinate between our sort of engineers and the rest of the different groups involved in this project. As I'm sure many of you know, this is a big citizen science project, so thank you all for being here. It doesn't work without you. This project is working with over 1,000 photographers spread all across the path of totality to take as many pictures as possible as the eclipse crosses the country. So once we've collected all of these pictures from all across the country, they'll be uploaded to Google servers. We will stitch them together to create a continuous view of the eclipse as it crosses the US. So rather than just a 2-minute view of totality and a 2-minute view of the corona that you would get from any one point in the US, we will have coverage across the entire hour and a half that the eclipse will cross the US. So once we have these videos together, we'll stitch them into a movie. We've got an algorithm that aligns them all just right and stitches them together. And then we'll also have this incredible database of photos that are submitted to the project that scientists can use to study the corona and the sun for years to come. So thank you again for being here and helping us out with this project. It's going to be fantastic.
Got to unmute here. All right. Thanks, Calvin. And thanks to all of you for being here. I just want to share this with you. I just put the link in the chat there. We have a new photo team setup that we just released today. So you can click on the link in the chat there. And this is the advanced photo team setup. So we have had the basics out for a long time. It actually has taken until now to kind of work out some of these details. And we just had a release of the newest version of the website yesterday. So we're excited to share that with you. And some of that will be coming out today. We'll be talking about that. This advanced photo team setup covers the setup instructions in a lot more detail than the basics. So with the basic, you can pretty much get through if you're new to this and you just want the very basics of what you need to do to set up your camera and equipment and take an image of the total eclipse. If you want a little bit more detail, that's where the advanced photo team setup, or if you're not understanding one of the steps, feel free to stop by the advanced photo team setup. The link to that is also at the bottom of the basic photo team setup, since if you will be using that as well. Let me go on here. A lot of what we're going to cover today is based in that advanced photo team setup. So let's just cover the basics about what you need to have equipment-wise. Of course, you're all here because you have a DSLR or a mirrorless camera that can take high-quality images. You will also need a zoom or telephoto lens. Now, the size of this is going to depend a little bit on the size of your camera and the sensor it uses. So if you go to the bottom here, this URL is, I'll put this also in there, is the cam calc. It calculates what size sensor, what size zoom lens you'll need depending on your camera. And you can actually put your camera type in there. It's really nice. Basically what we're looking for is between 1 and 4 solar widths on each side, on all sides of the sun, the eclipsed sun, when it happens. So we'll get into that a little bit more later, as well as this tripod information. I am so excited to be the first one to get to say you can use 2 types of tripod, either a camera tripod that can be leveled flat to the ground, horizontal to the ground, or you can piggyback on a telescope. I know this is something that a lot of you have been waiting for, to hear whether or not we can do it, and it seems that we can. We're pretty excited to be able to try this in the near future. I will tell you that it's not ready yet, but we are working on it, and we hope to have it before the eclipse, of course, very soon, which is very soon. The eclipse is also very soon. Just some optional equipment that you may or may not use. You certainly don't need to have this, but some of them are nice to have so that you don't have to do much fussing on the day of the eclipse. Now, all of these are covered in a lot more detail back on the advanced setup guide. So right now we have a computer for tethering. That's going to get us over to this software list here on the right side. There are quite a few pieces of software that will help you navigate when to take pictures of the solar eclipse, how to bracket and set up so that you can take all sorts of pictures, and you'll know exactly what you're going to do in advance. So if you feel competent and want to try out some of these Solar Eclipse Maestro or the Eclipse Orchestrator, on the Google group, there is a great discussion going on. If you have questions, there are a lot of experts. Xavier is often on and helping out with that from the Solar Eclipse Maestro. So that is what you might need if you're tethering to a computer. Other optional hardware you could use are a remote trigger. Often that's really nice if you are not going to be able to bracket your photos and you just want to click from wherever you are during the eclipse. A level is actually quite important if you want to make sure that your tripod is level to the ground, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. A white cloth actually is quite useful for keeping your camera cool. We are in the middle of summer, and you're going to be out under the hot sun all day. So you're going to want to try and keep your equipment cool. And a white cloth is just as easy as anything. Also a solar filter if you plan to take images before or after totality. And I see a lot of comments coming through. So we'll, let's see, John said to use emergency blanket instead of a white cloth, keeps the shade so that focusing is possible. That's a great idea. Thanks, John. All right. So let's just move on. Those are our equipment basics. And now we're going to talk about advanced preparation. This is stuff you can do right now to prepare for this. These are steps that you can take they're going to make your life a lot easier on the day of. The first thing that I'll cover, and then I'll pass this on, is setting your camera time to the second. This is going to be really important as we put these images together in the Megamovie. There are a lot of places online, and that photo team setup has information about where to find, if you need to find time down to the second. Make sure to set your camera for the time zone that you will be in during the eclipse, not where you're coming from often. So we won't be able to accept universal time on that first round of Megamovie images that go out for the images that will be made into the first movie. We will certainly accept universal time when it comes to science, using them for science, and that would be fabulous to have. But as far as making the first movie and that first initial upload, we're going to need you to use your the time where you are for the eclipse, the actual time zone that you're in. So there are a couple of other things that are pretty important: determining GPS location and calculating your exposure settings, of course. So I'm going to turn these back over to Calvin, and he's going to help us out with that. Calvin,
Yeah, so GPS, the other critical part of the alignment algorithm. So we piggyback, we use time and GPS heavily as we're sort of sequencing the photos that we'll get from across the U.S. So very important to make sure that we've got good GPS data coming in with the photos. And we've got a few different ways that you can give us that information. So first, and one of the more sort of straightforward but expensive ways to do things is if you have a GPS tagging either feature in your camera or an attachment that adds the GPS info in the EXIF tags for every single photo. That works very well. And if you don't have that, you can also just upload a single GPS tagged photo with the other Eclipse photos. So me, for example, I don't have a attachment for my camera. I'm going to set up, take all my pictures of the eclipse, and then take a picture with my smartphone of probably a selfie because I want to be, memorialized in the data set. So that photo that I've taken has a GPS tag from the smartphone. Our system, once all of those are uploaded, it applies the GPS tag to any photos in that batch that don't have one already. So that's sort of the easy way to do that if you don't have the GPS tagging device. And then one note on RAW files specifically. So when you upload photos to the website, there's a check that happens in the browser where we say, "Uh-oh, we don't see a GPS photo. Are you sure you want to submit as is? Because if we don't have GPS, we can't include this in the Megamovie." So it turns out that we can't read raw EXIF tags in the browser. It's not supported by the JavaScript stuff that we're using, but the backend will still be able to read them. So if you are one of those people using a GPS tagger and you're shooting in RAW, you can, if you want to be sure, you can convert a single photo to JPEG or TIFF and upload that as well. But if you're confident that there's a GPS tag, you can just sort of ignore that warning and go ahead, and it will be fine for the actual movie itself. I see one question here. So RAW is accepted anyway. We just need GPS for any photo that we get. So regardless of file format, we need GPS so that we can sequence everything correctly. And so you can either do that with tags in the raw file or with a separate image as described.
Great. Thank you, Calvin. And some of that's new information, so we've added it to the advanced photo setup as well as the basic photo setup. And now to talk about exposure settings and bracketing, I want to introduce Brian Mendez. He's an astronomer and public education specialist from UC Berkeley at the Space Science Laboratory. And he's going to tell us all about our exposure settings and how to actually take these pictures.
Okay, thanks, Bev. Good evening, everyone. So the corona of the sun, which is what we're all trying to take a picture of here, has a very large dynamic range. The part very close to the sun is extremely bright, and the part farther from the sun is much, much less bright. And so there's no way to actually take a photo, a single photo that will capture the detail at all those different exposure settings. So the best way to do this is to take multiple photos at different exposure settings. So there's actually a composite photo that's in the lower right there that Viv did a little circle around. This is a photo that was taken, I think they used upwards of 12 different images, 12 different exposures to composite together to make this view. One of the fun facts is that your eyes will be able to see this because your eyes are awesome. This is one of the things where the human eye just beats cameras all the time. So this is why you don't want to miss this with your eyes. But anyway, we need to then mimic with your eyes, or mimic with the camera what your eyes can see. And so if you can only take one picture, then what we suggest you do is try to figure out what the best exposure setting would be for kind of the mid-corona. And there are two options that are listed in the online documentation. One of them is a simple table that comes from the Mr. Eclipse website, where you've got a whole bunch of different photographers who've used their experience over the decades to kind of come up with the best list. And then another Eclipse chaser turned that into a online calculator. So basically, you kind of, for your camera and the ISO and aperture setting, it'll give you a list of different exposure times for different parts of the corona. So for example, if you're going to use aperture setting of f8 and an ISO of 100, if you're going to go around the mid-corona, which is what we'll call probably one solar diameter away from the sun, then you're talking about like 1/60th of a second is your exposure time. Now, if you can take more than one photo at a time, that's, or not at a time, but in a sequence, that's called bracketing. Some of you may be familiar with this. A lot of your cameras do this now in a fancy new feature called HDR, high dynamic range. And what HDR typically does is it takes 3 photos in quick succession, one with a fast exposure time, one with a lower exposure time, then one kind of in the middle, and then it creates an insto composite in your camera. A lot of the newest camera phones are doing this kind of thing. But in your DSLR, you may be able to do this as well with a feature called bracketing. Sometimes it's called advanced bracketing. And you may be able to, depending on the software that's installed on your camera, you may be able to bracket as many as 12 different images, which would actually be awesome. If you can do 12, super. If you can do 3, do 3, right? If that's all your camera will do as much as your camera will let you do. What you really want to do is get a wide swath of exposure times, and kind of center your center on the center of your exposure times on the center of, say, the list that's either in the table or that's generated by the online calculator. It's good to test this in advance for your camera, so make sure that you know what your camera is doing, so that when it takes this sequence of images that you've got, you know, one that maybe is 1 to 2 to 3 seconds long, and one in there that's maybe as short as a thousandth of a second, even 4/1000ths of a second. 4/1000ths of a second is great if there actually are some bright prominences or anything on the sun during the time of totality. One other thing that I'll mention here, and I know people will have questions, and we'll look at those for sure later on, but one other thing that you can do, if you're not using tethering software, because tethering software, you can set up this bracket being pretty easy, but if you're not using it and you want to be able to do multiple sequences, you can do this actually using the time-lapse feature if your camera has that. The older cameras may not have that, and if so, I can give you some hints on how to do this. But the time-lapse feature, basically what you want to do is set the interval between the time-lapse exposure starts to be just a little bit longer than the amount of time it takes your camera to complete one set of brackets. So for example, my camera, I calculated the other day when I did a test, it's about 14 seconds for it to complete a sequence of 10 images. So then I set my intervalometer to 20 seconds, so that gave it a little 6-second rest in between exposures. I'm going to be somewhere where the totality is going to last 2 minutes 34 seconds, so I had to be able to catch 6 to 7 different sequences that way.
That is so cool. I cannot wait. And we want all of them. Upload all of them. We'll take them all, because we will get a lot of different information from each of the different exposures. All right. Thanks, Brian. I just want to give some examples of photos that are going to be useful for the project and photos that are not going to be useful just for our project anyway. We know that lots of you are taking pictures for other personal reasons. Most importantly, we're going to want to have between 1 and 4 solar widths on all sides. So this right here is about 1 solar width. So here we're using test photos, that we took of the moon. These are test photos that you all have submitted, so thank you very much. We grabbed a couple of those. Imagine this is the sun on the day of the eclipse. We're going to need at least 1 solar width around all sides, but probably not more than about 4 solar widths at the longest on the top and bottom of your image. So that's important. They need to be in focus, and of course high enough resolution. You've probably calculated that already, and your cameras can do that, but they should be, it won't be useful if you just put a zoom lens on a camera phone. So they do need to be a high enough resolution. These are 2 great examples that we got. Some other examples that we got that probably won't work are these that are low resolution mostly. Low resolution or out of focus. These are just some examples of this one in the middle is out of focus. This one on the top right is actually too low resolution, and also on the left they're too low resolution. Evan just asked if we want these, interested in higher magnification images that focus on the diamond ring and chromosphere, and I'm so glad you asked, because that was my next slide. We do, higher resolution is fine, but they won't be used for that initial Megamovie, and we'll go through at the end here. Calvin will help us just kind of differentiate between what we'll be using for the Megamovie and what we'll be using for science. So yes, Bailey's beads and the diamond ring, we absolutely would love images of that, because we will be able to do great science with it afterwards. However, just for the Megamovie itself, we won't be using those of anything outside of complete totality. Higher magnification also, yes, we will take those, but they won't make it into the Megamovie, even if they are of totality, because we'll need full images of the moon covering the sun. Thanks, Evan, for asking that. So Bailey's beads, yes, feel free to upload those. The other thing you're going to want to know is when that's going to happen, when Bailey's beads will appear, when the diamond ring will appear, and when the sun will completely be blocked out by the moon. You can go, there is this Megamovie Basics, there's a link to the Megamovie app, on the Megamovie Basics, as well as the advanced Megamovie setup. And that will tell you when totality will happen. You're going to want to go ahead and set your timer for at least 5 minutes in advance, so that you know when that will happen for your location. If you're going to change locations, it would be really good to write down the timing for a couple of locations near where you think you will be, in case you're out of range, in case we take down the internet with all of our excitement over the eclipse. We don't actually think that will happen, but you never know. And this, so you might want to write that down, but you're also calculating it for a few different places around where you will be. If you're using Eclipse Maestro or any of the other software, this will do it automatically, so you don't have to worry about that. So that brings us to the day of. Okay, you're here. You haven't had any sleep because you're so incredibly excited about this. And so now what you want to do is make sure you have enough food and water and gas to be able to actually get to where you're going, and sunscreen, to all of those list of things that you're also bringing in addition to all of your photo equipment. We have a list of all those in case you want, from Astronomy magazine. They made a great list, and I added that to the Eclipse Megamovie setup just in case you want a little bit of a reminder of all those things. They have a top 10 list, I believe, top 25 list. But so besides all of the basics of getting sunscreen ready, you are also going to want to get your equipment ready that day, the morning of. And so we suggest you come and set up much earlier than even the partial eclipse starts. And Brian's going to get you started on what you might want to do to get set up for that. All right. Handing it back to you, Brian.
Okay, thanks, Bev. So you're going to want to know where you're going to point your camera. And this is smart to do, I think, even before the day of. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this. There's lots of apps for your tablets or cell phones that you can use that can show you the sky. And there's also plenty of desktop applications that do that. We listed a few here. My personal favorite that actually doesn't, I haven't gotten an app that works very well on phone, but it works great on your desktop, is Stellarium. And Stellarium, is extremely good. I was just testing it out today, and it has to the second the correct location and timing of the eclipse for places all along the path of totality. And so there's the screenshot here from where I'm going to be in Nebraska at the middle of the eclipse, and it shows you what the altitude and azimuth of the sun is going to be. So, you know, it's almost happening at noon, which is kind of fun. So you can use a piece of software like that to give you a sense of where it is you're going to need to point your camera in the sky. Another thing that might be useful to do is, if you can get to your observing location a day ahead of time, is kind of go there a day ahead of time at around the time of the eclipse and kind of practice everything, practice your setup, get a sense for the place. And you know, the sun will be in a slightly different place at the same time as the eclipse, but you know, within a few degrees, and so you'll have a general idea of, okay, this is where the sun's going to be tomorrow. So that's, you know, kind of figuring out before the day of where it's going to be. Then on the day, to actually point your camera, there's lots of tricks that, especially, I know your amateur astronomers know about, minimizing the shadow of the camera and everything to get it. And that's a really good way. If you don't want to, you know, look through the camera, you can minimize the shadow of the camera on the ground, and that will get you pretty close to being pointed right at it. If you've got a solar filter over the lens, then you can use the live view on most DSLRs, and that'll be fine. Also, with the filter on, you can look through the viewfinder, because the viewfinder just channels the light that's coming through the main aperture, so it's safe once you have the filter on. However, if you have a camera that doesn't, that is mirrorless, so it's not a DSLR, then it may have a separate piece of optics for the viewfinder, and if you don't have a solar filter covering that, no, don't look through that. That would be bad. Use the live view if you can. Right? Don't look through anything that is staring at the sun. Okay, and then the other thing is about setting up the tripod, and I know lots of people have had questions about this, so let's just go through it. We want to make sure that your tripod is nice and level. Now, the whole reason for all of this is because when they're trying to put together the actual movie, they need to have a fairly limited amount of rotation in the image, because if they don't, it's going to be impossible to stitch these things together. So to limit the amount of rotation, they basically want to have either one of two orientations. And one will be using for the astronomers out there, Alt-Az, or for the photographers, pan and tilt, right? So that means you need the base of your tripod to be level. And you can do that using these level bubbles that many tripods often come with. So you can see the pictures of my tripod there. It has one that's on the actual base, and then it has a second one that sits on the table that the camera is actually mounted to. So you may need to fiddle with your legs to get it just right so that you've got all your levels nice and set. If you don't have one of those bubble levels on your tripod, you can actually, there's lots of apps now for cell phones these days that will use the accelerometer in your phone to help you do leveling. And in fact, Calvin just pointed to us today that if you go to Google and type in bubble level, they'll just run an app right there in the browser. So you can just set your phone on the top of the platform and goof around until you get your thing level. If that doesn't work, you could use a plumb bob, which is just a string with some washers tied to it, or a rock or something heavy, so it just falls down. Connect it to the top of your maybe your lens hood. Take some pictures with the camera. Once you get that string completely vertical, then you've gotten your camera leveled. Some cameras may also have a artificial horizon feature that can help you out. Another thing about tripods, if you got a crowd around you and there's kids running around, you want to make sure that they're not going to bump into your equipment and knock stuff over. So for the safety of people and your equipment, one of the things you might do is put sandbags around the legs of the tripods. That adds a little bit of extra stability. And so finally, I have 3 pictures at the bottom that I want you to point out. So once you've got your tripod leveled, you put your camera on it, you want to swing around or pan in the azimuth until you reach kind of the closest location on the horizon to where the sun is, and then you want to tilt up to meet the sun. And so that's what the middle picture is showing. All right. What you do not want to do is what the third picture is showing, and use that third axis that is on many tripods, the rotation. Don't put any rotation in there. Just use pan and tilt, or azimuth and altitude.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. So Igor is answering one of the questions that we got in the chat as we go along, talking about Alt-Az and equatorial mounts and polar aligning. So that is an option. It's not something we're training for. Oh, did you see
the next slide, I think, actually.
Oh. Wait, there's more. Let's see. Let me get there. Brett, take it away, Brett.
Yeah, so yeah, as Vivian already mentioned earlier, we are definitely going to be able to support cameras that are mounted in a polar alignment, or what's often called an equatorial mount. So that means that you can just track in one axis as opposed to having to track in 2 axes. And so a lot of people who are actually wanting to track and make maybe time lapse of or videos of their own are going to want that kind of setup. Some people may do like what I'm planning to do. So here's a crude version of my piggyback setup that I just put together today, whereas they just piggyback the camera onto their telescope, which is on an equatorial mount. And in such cameras like this, north is always up, and that's the beauty of it. So that is apparently the system is not ready for it, but it will be ready for it. So yay.
Yay. So
one
for
of the
now,
things that I'm planning to do is with the telescope, I'm going to be projecting the image of the sun during the partial phases, onto a piece of poster board so that everyone around can, have a good gander at it, and then the camera will be prepared and ready to go at totality.
that is awesome. So for right now, I just want to mention, when you're testing this, if you are polar aligned, just go ahead and submit it anyway, and we'll understand that we don't have the functionality yet to get that note in there that you are polar aligned, but by the time the Eclipse comes, we'll be able to indicate that when you upload them as well. So keep keep posted for that. We will let you know. Thanks, Brian. So also day of, we're still waiting for the eclipse to come, and you're going to do a quick double check. We're working on a simple checklist so you can make sure you have all of these things done before the eclipse gets there. While you're enjoying the eclipse, while you're looking at the partial phases with your glasses, in between all of that, just make sure that your shutter speed and bracketing settings that Brian reviewed earlier are ready to go. Make sure you have enough memory and batteries for this part of it. There's a great discussion going on the Google group right now about how people are planning to image the entire eclipse and the energy setups that they're working on, everything from solar to batteries to, they have a lot of different very cool setups. So but just make sure you have enough batteries, especially for this total phase. If you want to contribute to this mega movie, we'll need you to have batteries. Double check your timestamp and your GPS location. Brian was saying earlier, Calvin was actually saying earlier, you don't have to take your GPS location at the exact time you're taking your pictures. You can actually take that JPEG with your phone with GPS location anytime leading up to this. So as long as you're going to stay in the same spot, you're good. Then make sure to turn off your autofocus and focus on the most distant object possible so that that the sun will be in focus. Of course, do not focus on the sun unless you've got your filter on. And disable the flash. It is poor eclipse etiquette, and also just really annoying to have flashes going off all around you when totality happens. And if you don't have your flash disabled, it likely will turn on because it will be quite dark. So just double check that that's disabled. And image stabilization, thank you, Mark. Yeah, we have that in the advanced setup too. So that will be on the list. Make sure to turn off all the image stabilizations. You're gonna make sure to have your zoom lens covered with a filter or your cap if you're not taking pictures of partial phases. And then cover your camera to keep it cool. There was some discussion on whether that would stop your GPS signal. And I have no idea on that. I'm sorry, there was some discussion in the chat about whether the emergency blanket would stop your GPS signal, and I don't know. So you're gonna have to fight that one out over, over probably in the Google group.
Test it out, that's what I say.
Test it, there you go, even better, use science. Evan mentioned to put a piece of duct tape over the flash. We do, if you have a flash that is built into your camera, that is an option. Maybe just black tape, duct tape sticks to everything. But if you have a flash that pops up, you absolutely don't want to tape it down. That is thanks to Rick Feinberg, who said that. He said, if you have a flash that pops up and you have taped it down, it will often make it will make you stop taking pictures. So it will give you an error message and you won't be able to take pictures, and then you're going to be messing with your photo and your camera during totality, which you don't want to be doing. So a couple of advanced notes here, and this is only for people who already know what this means. If you don't, just completely ignore me for the next 5 seconds. If you're shooting just in JPEG, you can set the white balance to 5800K. That's daylight. Sometimes it'll just say daylight on some older cameras. And then if you are taking flats and darks, we could use those too. That will be included for the science part. That would be really nice to have. If you're already shooting them, feel free to include them when you upload the rest of your photos. Okay, you can take your fingers out of your ears if you're new to this. And let's see. And then totality will be here. Before you know it, it will be there. And once you see Bailey's beads, go ahead and remove the lens cap or the solar filter. It will not damage your camera to take just those quick images right before. It will damage your eyes. Don't look at the Bailey's beads without glasses, but make sure to take your solar filter off of your camera at that point. Start your image sequence, or go ahead and start clicking pictures with your trigger. But most importantly, just stop looking at your camera, because it's going to be one of the most amazing experiences I have heard that it will ever that you'll ever have. So don't be messing with your camera. If something, if there's an error right before, let it go. Somebody else will get the picture. Go ahead and just enjoy this. Don't let it take away from your experience. Take a moment to just be in awe of our of our alignment with the sun and the moon. I think it's going to be pretty incredible. And also during the eclipse, just make sure you don't have any music playing. Take some time to actually experience just what is happening. You don't want to be behind your cell phone. You don't want to be having headphones on. You'll get to hear a lot more than just the darkness coming. You'll get to hear and feel and sense changes. Brian made a really good point about sandbags around the bottom of your tripod. That's also really important, because as it gets darker, often the winds will pick up, and it can get quite windy for just a few minutes there. You definitely want to know, you want to be stable when that happens. And Phil just made a nice note to go ahead and set the timer so you know when totality is about to end. You don't want to be looking at the sun when totality ends, and you want to be ready to put the filter back on your camera. So this is what it's all leading up to, and we're gonna really have to remember to take a moment to actually just enjoy these few minutes. It's going to be the fastest 2.5 minutes possibly of your life. And then once you come down from the adrenaline, Calvin's going to tell us how to upload all of these images.
All right, so you've just enjoyed the eclipse, and then you've had your celebratory beer or glass of wine, and now you're ready to upload your photos and participate in the Megamovie stitching process. So what we need you to do is, as soon as possible, I know many people are going to be sort of way out in the field taking photos from a remote, gorgeous location, but as soon as possible, if you can get back to your computer and start uploading your files, that lets us sort of proceed with the process and get the first sort of version of Megamovie out there. So what you'll need to do is go to your profile on eclipsemega.movie, upload your files. We went through some of the GPS tag things earlier, but making sure that there are tags in there, and then submitting them. And so once we've had people do that, we're hoping to generate the first Megamovie around 4 p.m. Eastern time, so giving people a couple hours to get back to where they have connectivity and things like that. And all images submitted by that point will be included in sort of the first cut. And so the first cut is 100% algorithmically stitched together. We sort of align all the circles of totality, put them in the right order, and sort of see what happens. It's the first time we've done this, and so we've got a good idea of what to do, but we're really excited to sort of see what comes out of it. And the more photos that we get in that first batch, the better it'll look. And if you're not able to make it by that first one, that is totally fine. We'll keep sort of generating new ones with as many images as we can and as many as are uploaded in the coming sort of days and weeks. And yes, one note about credits. So there will be credits for all of our fantastic volunteers at the end of the movie. Just make sure that the name in your profile on Eclipse Megamovie matches what you wanted to read in the credits of the video. So we'll just pull that directly from the account info from the account you're logged into there. And then if we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so a little clarification here. We threw some terms around that we would like to clarify. So there's sort of two different things going on here with the Megamovie project. There is the Megamovie, which is the algorithmically stitched together sequence of videos or of photos that covers the entire duration of the eclipse. And so that's images that are included in that are from you all, from the Megamovie Photo team. They are of totality only. They show the full disk of the eclipse, plus the sort of range around the photo that we were talking about earlier, or the range around the sun that we were talking about earlier. And they have accurate GPS and timestamps. And so those are the ones, that's just sort of what we need to make sure that we're stitching it together in the right way and that the sort of system can handle everything. Any images that we get that don't meet those criteria, we will keep, and they will be part of this enormous data set that we're going to share with scientists and the general public, and we're just going to sort of let people, have at it and see what they create. So I think this first Megamovie that comes out, it will be algorithmically done. It'll probably have some rough edges, but subsequent versions will let us sort of balance do the really smart stuff with raw files that let us get the best pictures possible and make sure everything's perfectly aligned and properly sequenced and everything like that. And so it's really just going to improve with time. And the Megamovie is sort of the day of preview, celebration, look what we've collected, and then the sort of the real work and the science begins, which will be really exciting. Let's see, is this me as well? Yes. And so we've got a few updates to the website that we're excited about. So for those of you that participated in our first big moon test, thank you. Your feedback was incredible. We learned a lot about things that were working well, things that weren't working well, and so we made some substantial changes. There's a new upload flow, which we're really excited about, that sort of lets you sort of review all the photos that you're going to submit as a final step and check or uncheck which ones you want to add and which ones you don't. We handle raw files much better than before. We had a lot of issues with that. There's still a little weirdness about GPS tags, which I explained earlier. But yeah, and then various clarifications and bug fixes. Yeah, and so there will be many more clarifications and bug fixes, I'm sure. So please let us know in the forum if you or on the Google group if you find other things that are weird as you're testing. But one of the things that we're really excited about coming soon is sort of the advanced upload settings for people using equatorial polar aligned mounts. So we can derotate those and align them with the rest of the images that people are taking on sort of standard photography tripods. So we're just sort of getting into the weeds there and sort of figuring out how hard that is. But we're really excited that we think we can do it. So yeah.
Yes, I'm so excited. So some of the questions you guys were just asking, actually, let me get back to this. I just tried out the new system with some old files that I had, and you can see the updates have been pretty fabulous as far as the upload goes. You can check or uncheck which files you want to upload. And you can see my Eclipse image that I just stole from the internet to try it out. That is successful, but then it didn't have GPS because it's not one that includes GPS. It's just a JPEG from the internet. And so I just took a selfie up here on the top left with my phone that has GPS on it. It doesn't have to be a picture of anything in particular. It just needs to have GPS enabled, and then I can upload all of those photos directly on there. And look, I took some that were, it says solar eclipse, but that wasn't the right solar eclipse picture I was looking for. So I unchecked that, and it will show that I have uploaded 2 files successfully once I hit submit. So those were some of the questions that came up while you were talking, Calvin, and I was just excited that it actually, it's so much has changed thanks to you guys testing this out last time and giving us your feedback about what you needed, and we're going to get as much of it done as we possibly can. Which comes to our last slide, and we're really excited to have you guys come and join us for this testing on this Saturday, July 1st. We'll be testing out some of the new features. Also, if you haven't tested out your equipment, please, if you want to join a group of us doing it. Last time we had almost 100 people testing out on the same night. It helps us out. It helps you get ready for testing. And we're also trying a new thing thanks to your suggestions. We are having a social where we're going to all show up online anytime between, 4 and 10 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. and 1 a.m. Eastern time. We'll have pizza, BYO, whatever you're drinking. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask us. We'll have some experts online. We have a few surprise guests coming to join us, and we'll put the information up on the photo group pretty soon when we get a final schedule for everybody. But we really would love to have you guys all test it out and come and say hello. And on the social that we're having, the link is on the Google group, and you'll be able to, you can show yourself through your webcam. We'll be able to talk back and forth. It won't be like this where it's all one way. We'll have a little bit of more discussion happening. And Spencer's very smart not to drink while handling expensive equipment, just pizza and root beer then in that case. And so now I want to stop sharing my screen and give you guys a chance to ask some of the questions. Brian, the other Brian, if you're online and have a minute to help us kind of navigate some of these questions. Also, I want to encourage you all to tell your friends about this. Have them join you, see if they are interested in doing this. If you know any other people who will be on the path of totality. We are almost up to 800 volunteers, which is so exciting for us. But we are looking to have at least 1,000. So please feel free to tell your friends about this. And now I really will stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thanks, Vivian. We've got quite a few questions that were asked here, and some of them I think we might have been, answered during the very first one. Michael says he would desperately like to know definitively how to use just a standard tripod accurately leveled and still get the eclipse oriented acceptably for this project. And so that question may have been answered during when Brian was speaking.
Well, I hope so. But if there's anything that's still unclear, let us know. I suppose we could always shoot a little video and put it up and say, do it like this.
Yeah, the video idea is something we've talked about. Well, we can put together some clearer instructions for that.
Okay, we had a number of people asking about raw images, and they've been trying to upload those, and apparently the file size is quite large. Is that going to be something that you're dealing with the next iteration of the upload function?
It is now. I saw a couple of those projects or those comments, so I'll file a bug and we'll dig into what's going on there. But yeah, let us know if it continues to be an issue, and we can sort of sort it out. It shouldn't be an issue. We shouldn't have a limit. But yeah, we'll sort it out.
Okay, so Terry asks, is on the file types, is DNG acceptable, digital negative?
I would need to check. I believe we accept all raw files, but I know there are a lot. I'll need to look into that one.
Okay, one of the questions that a number of people have been asking is that they might not have cell phone service, and I know that we've talked about this in our groups when they're observing the eclipse. So what should they do if there's no cell service where they are? What kind of options do they have?
So that's a very good question. From a GPS standpoint, GPS should work independently of cell coverage. There's some stuff most phones do a little bit of cheating with cell towers to speed up the GPS project or sort of process, but GPS should work without cell coverage just on its own. Other things like the star and sun alignment app, we'll need to do some testing on our side to make sure that there's a way to sort of download that offline and things like that. But yeah, that's a great point.
Okay. How about, I'm sorry, what?
I was just going to say, one of the things that we discussed earlier was, again, this is something you can test now. Put your phone in airplane mode and see whether or not the GPS tagging still happens when you take photos.
Okay. And then we had one person, can raw files be geotagged in the map module of Lightroom CC?
Yes. So if you tag them using a sort of editing software and things, that will work. We'll read those just fine. The same rules about, the browser doesn't read raw GPS tags applies. But yeah, we should be able to read those.
Okay, so just to be clear, any photo using UTC will not be used in the first run of the movie. However, photos with UTC will be used later on and for the science, correct?
Yes, so it's just something that requires a little bit of human touch, and the first movie is all sort of algorithmic. So yeah, if you can convert them to the local time zone, then we can definitely get them in the right order and include them in the video. But if not, then we'll have to sort of keep them for the later data set.
We will all be at the eclipse as well, so it's going to have to happen automatically because we will not be there to massage all of these.
Okay, so maybe if someone else can weigh in on some of these other questions and see if there's one that you think should be chosen to answer live here.
Let's see, sorry, I just saw one. Flat and dark, Michael Payton, if you are not already taking them, don't even worry about it. You don't even have to try and do that. So flats and darks are something that some of the advanced amateurs, amateur astronomers take often, amateur photographers take. So if you are already taking them, feel free to upload them. If you're not, don't even worry about it.
And here's a question, I want to bring this up. A lot of people are still having some difficulty getting into the website and not seeing the upload function. And so could, Calvin, could you say something about that and what we need to have people to do?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a few confusing things that go on with the getting the profiles all hooked up, because we've got sort of the Google side and the ASP side and keeping everything sort of all together at the same time. So the big things to do are to make sure that your profile has actually been created on the website, so that you've clicked through, you know, save your location that you plan on being, save your what kind of camera you're using and things like that. And then just making sure that we have the same email in the Google group or the profile that you've created. So the profile automatically grabs your Google account that you're logged into, and we use that to sort of know who you are. And so making sure that everything's set up there correctly and all that's in sync. And let us know if you're still having issues. We're doing our best to sort of keep up with all of we're simultaneously designing the system and troubleshooting it and putting out little fires here and there. So please bear with us if you're having trouble, but let us know what we can do to help, and we'll try and get it all squared away.
Yeah, we put a lot of time into doing some individual troubleshooting, and there's a number of people who I think we're at about 8% of the entire group currently don't have profiles. And so we would like to be able to troubleshoot with you so that you can upload your images. And so we're hoping to, we're going to be running another synchronization here in the next couple of days. And then we're probably going to send out some individual notes to those of you who don't have profiles. So, and to remind you of what Calvin just said.
I wanted to add one. There were some questions about the July 1st trial, the testing session. If you're clouded out that night, you can test anytime you want, and we will let you know within a week whether your photos that you uploaded were successful. This part is very manual still at this point because it's just the testing part. So we'll let you know. You can test anytime. And yes, we'll be using a very similar format to this. We'll be using a Zoom meeting so that we can actually all see each other and talk on July 1st. And you can come for any part of that or none of it at all. You don't have to do that. When you upload a successful photo and we write you back and say, congratulations, you've uploaded it, that qualifies you for the pin and some other cool stuff we're coming up with. So we will start to get all of those pins and things out probably in mid-July. So keep an eye out for information on that as well.
Okay, we had another couple of questions about maybe we could have Brian go back over the white balance and the preferred exposure really quickly, because I think that those, a couple of people have asked questions about that again.
Okay, so as far as white balance goes, if you're shooting RAW, don't worry about it because it doesn't really matter in RAW. But if you're shooting JPEG, then go for daylight as your white balance setting, because it's the sun. You're staring at the sun. And I was just thinking about, I saw someone asking about during totality, is it a little bit different? And well, I haven't actually directly observed a total yet, so I'm totally stoked about this. But I don't know of there being any particular tint to the corona so that you would want to go off of daylight. So I think it's probably safest to just stick with daylight as your white balance setting for totality. And then in terms of getting the exposure settings, what you want to do is get a range that ranges somewhere from 1 I mean, if you want to actually capture Bailey's beads, you'll want to get down to maybe as much as 1/4000th, depending on what aperture and ISO you're using. And if you want to get out to as many as 4 solar widths away, you'll want to get up to a couple seconds worth of exposure time. So that's quite a range, right? It's a pretty huge range. And for the mid corona, again, it'll depend on how wide you have the aperture and how low you have the ISO. But you know, for a kind of closed down aperture or sorry, for an open aperture and kind of low ISO, you'll probably want to hang in the you know, 30th of a second to 10th of a second range for the mid corona. But use the calculator for your camera and your settings to figure out where that should be.
I think Patrice was also asking about what we will need for the stitching process, and we're still working that out, which is why we want all of them.
Oh, yeah.
We're still working out how to actually identify which ones we're going to use.
Send them all.
So that
Yeah.
in the works.
And, you know, when you have your own set of brackets, you can try to make, you know, your own images like the ones that I showed in that in the slide there. It's quite an art to try to composite all those images together to create one master image.
Yeah. And so we are actually just past 7 o'clock Pacific time. So I want to let you know that we will answer some of these questions. We'll put them up on the Google group, anything we didn't get to. And I'll be doing that in the next day or so. So keep an eye out for those. And I want to thank you all so very much. Thanks to all our panelists. Thanks to all of the participants that showed up tonight. We look forward to maybe seeing you on Saturday if you're able to test. Even if you're not able to test, swing by and say hello. Thank you guys for being here. This is a really exciting project, and it's amazing to think that it might even work. So exciting. Thank you. Have a wonderful night.